guys, welcome to Rise. We're going to be going around Kenya interviewing different entrepreneurs. And today we're starting off with Moses Kemibaro. He's the CEO and founder of Dotsavvy, a digital agency company here in Kenya. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Aiden. It's a pleasure. Yes, I'm the founder and CEO of Dotsavvy. It's a digital marketing agency that I've been running now for almost 22 years. Started in my bedroom, very, very basic startup. And on the second side of things is I'm also a blogger, I'm a podcaster, I'm a technology analyst, and I love all things digital.
You said it's been going on for 22 years now. It started off in your bedroom.
Correct.
How did you tap into the digital market in Kenya from your bedroom?
Yeah, so for me, I think it was interesting because I come from what I'd call an entrepreneur family.
Right.
My dad was in business, and he did very, very well for himself. And even when I was growing up and really young, he always used to say that, when you guys get to be an adult and do your things, his ambition, or rather his expectation, was that we'd always try and do something of our own.
Right.
And I think that was always in the back of my mind. So even though I went through the rigors of, getting my first job, working in the earliest internet service providers in Kenya, in the back of my mind, I knew I wanted to start this. And the reason why even Dotsavvy started was, there was a time when I was working for what was one of the biggest, I suppose, digital agencies in Kenya at the time, called 3 Mice, which was a subsidiary of what was the biggest internet service provider at that time, which was Africa Online. And what would happen is I'd go see clients, potential clients, and they'd all tell me, it's great, we think you're great, we think your product, your proposal is great, but what, we cannot afford the price point that you guys are charging. So, a few people kept telling me, like, look, we'd love to work with you. If you had your own company at a price that's more affordable, would like to work with you. And I kind of felt like, okay, let me give this a go. And, I started moonlighting, and on the weekends, sort of starting to look at these clients and sort of starting to work with them. Yeah. And even before I had a company registered, I started actually helping many of them build their first websites.
All right, cool.
And you got to remember, this is circa pre-millennium. I think that was like 1999, 2000, 2001. And then I sort of formally set up the business, registered the business around 2002.
Okay.
And pretty much from my bedroom, started building it up, and that's where the business started.
Okay, cool.
And the whole idea was to provide an affordable opportunity for mostly SMEs at the time to build websites and put themselves online and have the opportunity to do business through the internet.
Right, yeah. So then how did you learn these skill sets? How to design a web page and everything like that? Did you learn them from working at this company, or did you go to school for something? Yeah.
So by the time I was starting the company, of course, I was working for a much bigger organization then, and inherently the company had web developers, designers, strategists, account managers, that was the role I was in at the time, and then eventually business development. And by virtue of sort of working with some of the biggest companies in Kenya at that point, whether it was Kenya Airways, helping them build their first e-commerce enabled website, working with Safaricom, helping them build and manage their websites, people like Kenya Commercial Bank, these are the clients we're handling. These are all the top tier corporate businesses in the country. And I had the privilege of engaging, winning the business, pitching, and all those skill sets came to bear when I was ready to set up my own business.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting that you mentioned now how much harder it was to access like the digital atmosphere way back then, because about 1990s you were saying.
Oh yeah.
And that's one thing I'm more interested in too, and I'm sure a lot of people watching this are interested in, is the differences between North America at that point and Kenya at that point.
So the infrastructure was very, basic, and again, very costly for the average person. So even at that point, relative to what was in North America, was a massive gap.
Yeah.
And we're talking about also another big point to this is that technology, or rather, computers, were still something relatively almost unique or elitist at that point. Unless you had money, you had a computer.
Right.
It wasn't like what you have now, where for the equivalent of about $50, you have a decent smartphone that allows you to get online wirelessly on 4G, 5G in Kenya. Yeah. So it was very basic, very early days. I remember when we were building our first websites, even in my company, we'd go to our client offices with floppy disks, pre-CD, and then you'd use something called WinZip or PKZip to unload the files onto the computer to demo, because most guys didn't even have decent internet access in their offices. So you do the demos of the websites on their computers, and that's how you sort of sold and pitched and sort of did progress reviews with your clients. So we've come a long way since then.
Oh yeah, for
and
sure.
also using cyber cafes.
Yeah.
Cyber cafes is another way that we were able to get online cost effectively, easily, to actually do the work. Yeah.
Cool. And then how about the demand, like the customers, the market? Do you think that there's the same demand here as in North America, or how would that be?
At that point in time or now?
Both. First off, at that point in time.
I think the appetite was always great, and I think Kenya is kind of set apart because when you think about how endemic the internet has become to this particular market relative to, say, even Nigeria or South Africa, Kenya is definitely one of the epicenters on the continent.
All right.
Right?
Yeah.
And another thing that you'll see is that Kenya, for some reason, seems to have a tendency for early adoption when it comes to technology. That's one of the reasons why you'll notice that, say, M-Pesa, which is a mobile money platform, has been very successful here.
Yeah, that's a good point because a lot of the viewers won't know what M-Pesa and Safaricom is, what you're talking about. So pretty much Safaricom is like the internet provider, but they also own M-Pesa, which is, you explain M-Pesa.
Yeah, M-Pesa is basically a mobile money platform, right?
Yeah.
So it gives you a digital wallet. It lets you send money to other people, peer-to-peer. It also lets you, be able to pay for products and services, provided a client has an M-Pesa, what do you call a till number or a pay bill number. So that means in a retail scenario, in a restaurant, you'd normally pay using a till number. If it's a business-to-business sort of transaction, that tends to be sort of using a pay bill number, where, for instance, you could pay for your electricity bill using a pay bill number.
And
So
it's so much easier than having a debit card too. Like you just go into a store, go on the app, type in the code, type in the amount, send it, and you're done. It's easy, and especially sending money to each other too. But the interesting thing is that it's a private company, and they pretty much have a monopoly around this. So that's really interesting too. And I've heard that's because of the amount of government support they've had over the years, and that the access to their cell towers and everything as well.
I mean, it cannot be overstated how important it was for the regulatory framework in Kenya to have sort of a light touch when M-Pesa came to market. And that was very instrumental to what we see as the current success. If regulations had been more constraining or limiting, M-Pesa would not be what it is today. I think the government took a sort of a let it happen approach. And today, even for most government services, we even use M-Pesa as well for that. So I think we're very fortunate in that sense.
Yeah, for sure. And that feeds in how you're saying how it's a lot more accessible now because of the infrastructure and everything. But we should get back to talking about your company. So talking about marketing yourself and how you grew as your own brand, how did you start to gain customers, and what was the sense of innovation there and gaining traction here in Kenya?
So one thing I'm very passionate about, because remember I come from a very strong sales background. I received a lot of training, even in earlier entrepreneurial activities that I'd been involved in before Dotsavvy. I'd actually been always somehow in the front lines of sales. I've always been good at that. And you got to remember, this is a time, if you're thinking about 2001, 2002, we didn't really have venture capital or angel funds or that kind of money. If anything, maybe friends and family would give you some money.
Sorry to interrupt, but there's still a problem now today, right? With a lot of companies in Kenya, it's so hard to gain capital because the fees are so expensive for business loans from the government.
Correct.
Is that right?
Yeah. So most of the time, if you went to the bank, they wouldn't give you money. You don't have collateral. If you talk to friends and family, as I recall, many of them told me, why don't you go get a job and then you can save some money and start your business? That's the kind of advice I got from people who are millionaires. Many of the investor class were actually at that point in time investing in land and real estate. So we didn't even have like the tech boom we see now in Kenya, where even independent investors or other types of investors are looking to invest.